Hey guys, so today we're going to be doing my review for Underwater. Now, I don't think I was originally intending on reviewing every single horror movie that I saw in theaters, but I think I'm going to try to do that because I got so many requests to talk about this movie, to hear my opinion about it, and I didn't think you guys cared that much about this, my opinion about this movie, but I figured let's go ahead and do a review for Underwater. So this follows a crew that is stationed at a drilling station miles beneath the surface of the ocean in the Mariana Trench, and one of the sections actually collapses and fills with water after an earthquake and leaves the crew fighting for survival while also being hunted by these mysterious underwater creatures. So this movie was actually filmed in spring of 2017, but since Disney purchased 20th Century Fox, the release for this was actually pushed back to January of 2020. So this of course stars Kristen Stewart, and I think a lot of people see this and are immediately underwhelmed because the feedback and the comments that I got when I said this was on it was one of my most anticipated horror movies of 2020, and I was saying how I feel like the trailer shows too much. A lot of people were like, it shows Kristen Stewart, so it already showed too much. People are generally not really a fan of Kristen Stewart and her acting abilities, and they were kind of right when it came to this movie, but I think she doesn't have to carry this movie because there are other characters, there's more dialogue with other people, and there's a lot of like quiet parts and non-dialogue parts, obviously the scares and everything. So I feel like she didn't have to really carry the movie, and the fact that she wasn't necessarily the best actor in the movie didn't really matter too much because of the movie as a whole, if that makes any sense. The plot is pretty much straightforward. It's not like you get too much dialogue from Kristen Stewart or anything like that. So for me, her acting didn't take away from this movie. So the movie gets started right away, which I was not expecting. Like the first scene, the opening scene, is the collapse of the drilling station and the water plunging into the like chambers and everything. So it gets started like within the first few minutes. The movie is only an hour and a half long, and they definitely fill that entire time with action and plot and everything. Everything feels important. There aren't moments. I didn't feel like any scenes were dragged on too long. I thought the pacing was really well done in this movie with how much time they had to work with. I felt like it could have been better had they given it an extra 30 minutes. Maybe then some of the scenes would have been a little too extended. So maybe I'm wrong in stating that, but I think an extra half hour would have given them the backstory and the plot that they needed. However, in the opening credits, there is a lot of articles being flashed to you, and that's kind of the backstory plot, so they don't have to necessarily explain it all in dialogue or through conversations between characters or anything like that. So you do have to kind of pay attention and read some of the article headlines and things like that as they're flashing up in the beginning to kind of understand why they're under the ocean, why they're stationed there, what they're doing down there. So TJ Miller stars in this as the comic relief, and I honestly didn't hate it. Normally comedy in horror movies that aren't dark comedies don't really, you know, do much for me. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I didn't hate him in it. I felt like he wasn't the butt of the joke for like every scene or anything. Like he was a genuine person, also like a believable character. He just happened to be funny. So obviously it wasn't my most anticipated horror movies for 2020, and I honestly was not expecting to like this movie as much as I did. The trailers, although it made it look good, I thought it might have been a little cheesy. Like it could go a little bit too cheesy, so I was worried that Kristen Stewart wouldn't, you know, be the best, and the plot wouldn't be supported and explained well, and it would just be like a cheesy action-y kind of creature feature. But I was pleasantly surprised that it was genuinely a creature like horror movie. So yes, they don't spend a super long time developing the plot, and yes, Kristen Stewart isn't the best actor in the movie, but overall the horror was really done well, and there are a lot of jump scares in this, but I felt like most of the time they were followed through, so they weren't super annoying. There was a handful of them that were like, okay. Every time I talk about jump scares, I swear she jumps up here. Did that scare anybody? So one of my biggest worries about seeing the trailer for this movie was that it showed too much, because you see a lot of the creature in the trailer, and I was like, I hope that doesn't take away from the reveal in the actual movie. Let me just say, it does not. You could watch the entire trailer over over and over. You could study it and still not know what is really going to be happening in this movie, which is great. I think they actually executed the trailer to movie ratio of what they actually show really well, so don't be afraid to watch the trailer if you have been avoiding it. I think there's so much more going on in the actual movie. I don't know if there are multiple trailers actually, now that I'm thinking about it, so I don't know if I want to say that so confidently and then you watch a trailer and it might show some things. Anyway, there's just a lot more going on in the movie than the trailers seem to let on, so I'm just going to leave it at that. So there's actually some pretty decent gore in this movie as well, which is another horror element that I think was executed well. They were actually really great at building the tension and actually surprising you with jump scares. Usually, I mean, I'm pretty desensitized to jump scares. The whole audience that I was watching this movie with, I went by myself to an early screening for this movie, and I swear the audience around me were horrified by this movie just based on their, you know, not being able to watch certain scenes and their reactions to jump scares. They're definitely effective jump scares, and I will say that although sometimes they're predictable, they still end up surprising you because the timing isn't exactly what you would anticipate, I think, when it comes to jump scares. So I didn't honestly hate the jump scares in this too much. Also, I felt like they ended the movie really well. I was kind of scared that they were going to end with a cliche or like make it predictable. I did kind of predict what they were gonna do by the end, but I was pleasantly surprised also with the ending because it wasn't necessarily what I was anticipating from the beginning, expecting like kind of a cheesier creature movie. So obviously this movie was really effective for me personally, scare-wise, because I am so afraid of deep water, and like I can't even imagine being miles below the surface of the ocean. I can barely go 10 feet below the surface of the water in like pools. So, and then also just like the visuals and everything, it was very haunting looking and very scary. The creature, amazing. So I've seen some theories floating around that this could actually be a Cloverfield movie, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that it's not in the Cloverfield universe, but I think it is a fun idea to kind of imagine that it is when you're watching it, because it would be a much better kind of origin story to the original Cloverfield. It's way better than Paradox, so if you want to go in with that thought process, I don't think it would hurt anything. So it could be a Cloverfield movie if you really wanted it to be, but I don't think that was their intention. Obviously, I really enjoyed this movie, and it was way better than I initially anticipated, and I was already kind of excited for it because it was like deep water creature feature, but it's actually really, really good. Like, it's really cool. It's not that cheesy. Give Kristen Stewart a chance because the plot and the scares really carry this movie, so she doesn't have to. If you're planning on seeing anything right now, don't see The Grudge. See Underwater. I think it's amazing. So I do kind of want to talk about sort of the end of the movie and what I really liked about it. So it's a little spoilery if you haven't seen it yet. Do not watch the rest of this video, but do go watch Underwater. So if you stuck around for this part of the video, I imagine you've already seen it or are not going to see it and you just want to know what happens. So like I said, the trailer does not reveal everything that goes on in the movie, which I was so happy about because they show a lot of the creature or creatures in the trailer, and there are many of them. And you see them and they're kind of like slightly larger than like humans. So it's still scary, but that's why I thought it was kind of gonna be kind of cheesy, is because they're not that big. They honestly don't look that terrifying. They do kind of remind me of the Cloverfield monster, but like small. But then it happens towards the end and you realize that the small creatures, or slightly larger than human creatures, are actually the babies, and they are being hatched out of their mother's skin, and there's hundreds of them. And oh my gosh, when they revealed the giant monster, I was in awe because I was not expecting it at all, and I thought it looked amazing. And again, it plays into the phobia of large things. So there's something really haunting about visually looking at something that big underwater. I don't know what it is, but it's like a separate, like, just fear in itself, I feel. That's one of the reasons why I feel like the horror in this is actually really effective, because they have you feel that claustrophobic feeling of being in these like chambers with the water pressure, you know, pushing because they're 7 miles below the surface of the ocean. But then you also have these monsters that are slightly creepy, whatever. But then you have this giant monster, which, thinking about how massive this is in comparison, is just so horrifying to me and so creepy and scary. So the horror was really, really effective for me. And like I talked about, the ending being not really that cliche, Kristen Stewart, you know, doesn't survive, which I actually really liked, because she's obviously one of the main characters. We kind of are following her and her plot and her journey. I thought for sure they would have her survive with like one other person, specifically the really anxious, nervous intern. Or assistant or whatever, she corrected them in the movie because they addressed that. I thought it would be like them two surviving and like her going through this whole journey of like becoming really strong. She already was, so I kind of appreciate the fact that she didn't survive, and she encouraged her two colleagues and friends to survive because there were only 2 working pods. Although it was kind of expected, because some of the conversations and some of the plot that happened earlier on when they talk about the love story between the 2 people that do survive, I kind of anticipated it over time, but in the beginning I was initially expecting Kristen Stewart to survive, which would have been a little cheesy, a little cliche, but I'm glad they went this route instead, and I enjoyed the ending. So that is my short and sweet underwater review. Definitely go see it, give it a chance in theaters, because visually I think it really stands out, and I thought it was done really well. Definitely surprise for early on in 2020. So we have 1 hit of Underwater and 1 miss of The Grudge so far, so we'll see how the rest pan out. If you have seen Underwater, please leave your thoughts down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.